Hey, Ron, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Dentistry Decoded podcast. In this last episode of season 2, we are wrapping up and speaking to someone from one of the biggest digital dentistry companies, a company that I really, really like. They've done a lot for digital dentistry and introducing so many people to intraoral scanners and really pushing the main competitors back 3, 4 years ago to change their business models, remove subscriptions, etc. This is, of course, Medit, and today we're talking to Mr. Matt Mark. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate being on, and I love to talk about digital dentistry with you, and then kind of some of what's been going on at Medit. Hear your opinion on it too.
Yeah. I'm sure it's going to be a great chat, and I'm sure people will be very curious. So, Matt, you work as the Senior Director of Education and Marketing in Medit America. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I like to think of it basically. I'm responsible for trying to make as many people hear about what we're doing. Just kind of make people aware of everything Medit's up to, all the new stuff we've got going on, and just try to contribute as much as we can to that message. But I think there's a lot already out there about Medit, and so a lot of my job is just continuing to bang on the same drum that's been, that really, to your point, started the industry transition a few years back.
Yeah, I mean, Medit had an amazing 4 years up until, not up until, but they had this crazy like whirlwind 4 years, and then they sold the company, and now it's been an interesting year. But before we get into that, let's learn a little bit about you. How long have you been at Medit for? I think about over a year, I believe.
I'm coming up on a year and a half.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's been fantastic actually so far. But I've only been at Medit, but I've been aware of Medit since it started really with intraoral scanners. So for me joining, it was one of those opportunities that I was only like ever dreaming about. So it's been a lot of fun.
And what do you do prior? Are you like a technician or dentist? I saw somewhere that you worked at some labs or something, or?
Yeah, so I was not I will never claim to be a dental lab technician. I did work at a dental lab though. So I got my start at a dental lab in the middle of in a little state called Missouri, in the middle of the US. But I worked for a company called National Dentex. That was my very first job right out of college. And NDX is like, they have like now I think somewhere around 50 to 60 labs across the US.
Huge.
So they're a very large lab group. So actually kind of cut my teeth there. Actually started with like sleep appliances and Team J appliances and things like that. So had a really great introduction there. And then I was also NDX's first product manager when they started to build out like a corporate team. So I spent almost 10 years to the day at that company and got a ton of great experience, some of which was actually on the digital dentistry side. So we had some very early partnerships, first with 3Shape and then later on with iTero. And we had a really long running relationship with iTero. I was at the lab when iOS scans were kind of first getting popular, and then, really dug in later on through working with those companies directly.
Especially iTero, yeah, they had a really good run early on with pushing Invisalign. Now maybe not so much, and then Medit came along and they've done amazing stuff. And so you were at this lab for 10 years, a decade.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I had a lot of different jobs. So I started on the phones, basically just answering questions when dentists would call in about cases. And then, for everything from, we launched a sleep appliance through the FDA there while I was still at the lab. But then I helped even once I moved to the product side, got to work on some really interesting products. One of the great things about being at a very large lab group is they're willing to try things if they think it's going to introduce some efficiencies or differences in production. I remember tinkering with some of the very early digital printed dentures, and those were compared to where we are now. It's been a pretty radical transformation on that side too. I worked in the corporate office there for about 3 years, and then the last 3 years there, I spent running sales and marketing for one of their subsidiaries.
Interesting. Yeah, man, that's crazy that you got your teeth into digital stuff that early. It's like you say, it's changed radically since those days.
That's all for the better, basically, across the board. So that part has been fantastic to see. And it's made a lot of this a lot more accessible too, which I think is one of the reasons I found Medit so exciting, because that was when I think, especially on the lab side, we saw the lid kind of come off on scanning, was when there was an affordable scanner on the market that like produced quality scans.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely Medit was instrumental in that with their, I remember having the first i500, one of the first ones in New Zealand, and that was mind blowing. And now you look at it now and it's nowhere near like the i600, the i700, all of those other products. It's interesting. So are you running the whole team for education marketing in Americas?
Correct. Yeah. So we have, in addition to just kind of general marketing activities, we also have education and clinical training team. So that team, they're every day working with dentists and, either train them on Medit scanners, installing, troubleshooting, that kind of stuff. So yeah, all of those teams work with me. And, I like to say Medit is still very new outside in terms of actually having a big presence outside of Korea. So we've added a lot to our team in the last year, especially in the US, and we're continuing to make the investment there. It's a lot about, being able to support customers, I think, more directly. So we haven't changed anything from a business model standpoint. It's just if there are issues, if there are additional things needed, like we want to be there for the customer and allow Medit to interact directly.
Rather than going through distributors.
Yeah. We still work closely with them, and the distributors are an essential part. But for us, I think we see that even if we say the distributors are the immediate contact point, sometimes people just want to talk to the guys who made the machine and they want them to fix it.
100%. And oftentimes you guys are the ones that know it best.
We would hope so. We got some really, really smart distributors though. We have some guys who've been using Medit for a very long time, and they teach us sometimes too.
That's super cool, man. So we're at the end of the year, and this will probably be published by the time we get through Christmas, everything sometime in Jan. So it's kind of like a year in review for Medit.
Okay.
You've been there for a year, which is kind of handy. I would say you weren't there for the golden ages, but that's a bit cheeky. How has it been, genuinely? To me, from the outside, and this is not being I don't mean to say any offense or be rude in any way or put you on the spot. To me, it's been a tough year from the outside. From what I saw in the golden ages where Medit was just steamrolling everyone, now it seems like there's just so much more competition. You're getting people releasing interesting things like Shining with the Elite system and photogrammetry, and we had the i900. Now, I'll be honest, I don't mind the i900. I've said it before, I don't really care for the button controls. I would have preferred a button, but it is a good scanner, and I think it's the best scanner Medit has made. But it's always harder to go from Toyota and then sell the Lexus than the other way around, which we saw Trios do this year, which was, drop their prices. It's always easier for any company to drop prices. And so it felt like there was a lot of resistance. And then you had the subscription thing, which honestly, again, it had to come. It was never going to be free forever. That generated a lot of heat. Has it been a bit of a hard year for you guys?
So I want to at least I'm not going to push back too hard, but I will say so I think the subscription piece, are you talking about the cloud storage change?
Yeah, I don't mind personally, but it was a lot of pushback.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it was one of those things that I think was inevitable. It was 99 cents a month for, basically as long as Medit offered it forever. And it was a crazy amount of storage, more than, we did the analysis. There was 2 people, I think, globally who were using more than that in storage. So it wasn't exactly being maximized, I will say. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those where it was extremely expensive to keep that going, and we wanted to continue to provide the solution. I will say the rest of Medit software is still completely free. You're not paying to use our software. You're not paying to use our apps. So you can download, any user in the world can download Medit Link today, go in, import a case from any other system on the planet, and start using our software. So I think that is still like at the core of what Medit is behind in our philosophy, and being an open system that's very accessible. That hasn't changed. The pricing on that is, we've had a lot of doctors and I've had hard conversations about it. It's still the cheapest or some of the cheapest cloud storage you can find anywhere, even public markets. So that being said, I will say internally, it was a tough message for the market, I think, in that, hey, Medit isn't just playing in what, you might call like a value space,
Yeah.
where we're just offering a really, really, really price competitive package. And I believe because our technology really is at the highest quality in terms of the marginal accuracy, the kind of outcomes and results you can get, the breadth of our software, those things, we believe there is a lot of value in that. And we have no recurring payments associated with any of our systems, other than if you opt into cloud storage, which is not a requirement. Most people don't actually. So there is no recurring fees there. And so, yeah, we did launch at a price point that I think in retrospect, it might look high compared to where the market was. It's actually very similar to where some of the older products launched. That's just how much prices have compressed over the last few years. For us, we saw it as, yeah, this is our new product. It's anchored at a certain price point, but we understand where the market's going. And so we want to be a company that has solutions kind of at every level and for every clinician. So if you just need the basic scanner for very simple scans and you're not someone who's scanning in hygiene and you're not doing it frequently, we have really competitive solutions at that price point. But we believe the i900 technology it's a totally new infrastructure in terms of the camera system and the internal components. It was really a true upgrade in that sense. I hear you. I understand. I would say internally, we didn't view it the same way as that difficult of a year. It was, I think, something Medit's not done before. And it's always easier to your point to go down than up. But I do think it allows us to make investments in other places.
Is there whispers of, like, again, not putting you on the spot, is there any indication that we're thinking of shuffling that price around? Has it been successful for the i900? Because I have to say, I mean, again, you will have the data much better than me. I was seeing i700s fly off the shelf. Everyone and their dog was buying i700 at the golden age of Medit. And the i900, from an outside perspective, just doesn't seem to be as popular. Is that a fair statement? Or
I mean, I don't think that's an unfair statement at all. I think the difference, one, is we are at a higher price point. So there's just less customers at that price point, something we knew going into that launch. But the other point, and you already hit on it, which is I think the landscape for a value price system has just completely shifted. From the time when the i700 launched, you really didn't have a lot of competition in that price bracket. Now, I would almost say that's the most competitive space for scanners. There are new solutions, I think, at every event I go to where I see another scanner that I've never seen before, and no one's launching at, $20,000 plus anymore.
The cheapest I've seen is $5,000 US. And I'm using it, I'm testing it, and I have to say, and again, it's not a dig, but they work. This is the crazy thing. This is what's happened to technology, is that the price, it was funny. I think Medit came in at the right place at the right time, and they really capitalized big time on it. Because if they released the i700 now in this market, just going by what you're saying, and I totally agree, I think it would have been totally different because the competition now is just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Medit, the i700 launched, I believe the MSRP was over 20,000 when it launched. So like we're talking about that same price point, 4 years later, and you're like, wow, that's like, incredibly different, right? So for that perspective, I think we see where the market's going. We see the demand, and you're right. I mean, the actual scanning portion of the procedure or of the workflow, it's been to some degree commoditized, at least for the basic scan. Like if you're just scanning dentition, there's, I would say almost every scanner on the market at this point, like, can get the job done.
I agree.
It's more about ease of use. And then I think something you always talk about, because I do listen and read some of your stuff, is what do you do after that, right? Like anybody can take a scan at this point. Any scanner can do that. But what are you doing with that image, with that STL after? And that's, I think, where the scanner companies that are going to be around in 5 or 10 years are differentiating.
100%. And you can see that there's a lot of things that Medit really introduced to the market. I mean, now they're getting a bit of bite back, almost like biting the hand that feeds you in a way, because they really, as a company, introduced a lot of things. They were one of the first companies that introduced no subscription fees for a scanner. And this was not for trial, it was just for a scanner. Because at the time when the i500 came along, it was Trios, which if you didn't pay a subscription, you couldn't use the scanner, I believe. And iTero was the same. It locked you out of features. The other thing that Medit did was release Clinic CAD, and that was just last year or something. And that's like a whole CAD software, which again, look, it's not ExoCAD, but it's pretty bloody amazing. You get this for free.
Yeah, and I think we know we're not ExoCAD, and we don't want to be, right? I think, but those kind of investments on the software side are things we want to keep making. And to do that with no subscription fees, I think is the core of who Medit is and how we're going to continue to build, like, you know, fans and people who, you know, may have really loved Medit when we first launched. We want to keep them excited, and that's continuing to innovate. And that innovation is going to come in the form of new applications, improvements on workflows, things like that. And, you know, those things are, if you're not charging a subscription, like those are long-term investments we make in our customers. And so I think that's where, you know, are we going to come out with a scanner that's $4,000, right? Probably not. If you also want all this software and investment, that's probably not the market that we want to be in if we're also going to give you everything else. If you just want to scan and, you know, send to a lab and you don't care about anything else, well, there's a lot of technology. Medit has some really good solutions for that. But if we're going to also give you all these other software features and, you know, the ability to do cases in your office with, you know, no additional fees, like that's a different conversation, I believe. And I think the customers over time, at least what we're seeing here in the US, is it's not a matter of if you're going to do some sort of chairside workflow, it's just what are you doing?
Yeah.
And how integrated is it into your office? Like, how many cases are you still sending out versus how many are you doing in your practice? And so that's where I think as we look towards the next few years, it's how do we enable that transition while still, you know, maintaining a great product at a price point that makes sense.
And what's interesting on the point that you mentioned in terms of the accuracy, and I really do believe Medit scanners are actually really good. And I did actually a bit of a methodology recent because I want to write a paper for next year. We collected all the data. And so we used a contact measure machine, which is basically as accurate as you're going to get to measure a model. It's not just, you know, scanning it with a lab scanner and volumetric meshes.
Yeah.
So we use a contact measure machine on this full arch implant model, and I scanned it with every scanner I have. I think I have more scanners than anyone on the globe. It was like 25 scanners. Each scanner got scanned 15 times.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, look, just off the cuff here, this will be released in Jan. Medit i900 topped the list. It wasn't like a massive gap between microns. I mean, I think Medit was around, you know, let's say in the 10s and 20s of inter-arch discrepancy for implants for full arch. And the lowest scanner was about 110. And I was, you know, pleasantly surprised because to me, it's like all I saw online was Medit i900 getting a beatdown. And it is actually a very good, accurate scanner.
From your perspective, because I'm kind of getting, and tell me if I'm wrong here, a little bit of a vibe of like you were someone who liked Medit and seen some of the transition and maybe a little disappointed by that. I guess from your perspective, like, is it mostly the price point that like caused you some heartburn this year, or was there other parts of the system?
I'll be honest, man, it's not so much I dislike Medit now at all. I actually really like the company. I really like the people in there, even though they've shifted around quite a lot now. Yeah, a lot of transition. That's expected in a corporate takeover. I don't have any heartburn or bad feelings. I purely just watch the industry and take notes. That's all I do. So I wouldn't say I'm really like cut up because Medit didn't release a cheap scanner. Not at all. All I would say is I'm watching, and there's a couple of notes I would address is that, for one, it's been interesting for me to watch. I wouldn't say like a sinking, but definitely not this like steamrolling that happened in the past 4 years. It's not like that. And quite frankly, I don't think we'll ever see a scanner company do that ever again. That was like once in a lifetime to watch a company just come in and disrupt an industry and not exit, but sell at the peak and see you later. I would say what's more interesting to me is the comparisons, because with Medit, it was always, like you said, the value scanner. We're giving you all this value. We're giving you all this value. And when you start stepping into the premium space, all the messaging around the company is not value scan anymore, which I think is interesting. And also you're starting to get into the space of like triage scanners, which is a huge discussion point, especially with edentulous scanning. I think MIDAS scanners are exceptionally good, and I've used them for many years since the i500. But there are things that some scanners do better than others. Like Trios, I just think they really dominate edentulous. They've been doing that for a long time. I think it's an interesting market now with things like Shining Elite releasing their photogrammetry thing. And to me, all I would say is I feel like we were so spoiled in the past 3 years of Medit with so many releases. It was like every month new software, every month new app, new scanner, wireless i700. Oh, wait, we also have the i600. And then for the past 12 months, I honestly would say it's been a bit of a lull, if anything. Maybe it was the whole takeover and transition period, which is very hard to manage, I can only imagine. But I feel like, we haven't really seen that many apps released anymore. I mean, they get to a point with what else can you do, I think. We haven't seen as much fire, The Medit had something to prove. It was kind of like the David and Goliath story. And I don't know, I just don't see as much people talking about it, as much, that fire is gone to me.
Well, I think some of that is, I think what you just said was indicative of there was transition, right? There was a lot of transition that happened. I am here because there was transition in the company, right? So I won't, discount that by any means. What I will say though is a year ago or early 2023, kind of coming off some of the best times that Medit's had, there were a handful of employees outside of Korea, really. And I will say what has been possible in the last year, there was a lot of internal growth at Medit that I think you guys maybe haven't seen the fruits of yet because it hasn't shown up in a major software release every 2 months or something like that.
Yeah.
I will say the customers who work with us have probably seen it a little bit because, as I said, we've made a lot of investments in internal systems, in building up support, building up training, and really trying to do a better job, I think, of taking care of the people who have decided, hey, I'm going to invest in Medit. So we're shoring up that foundation. But I can tell you that the team who is here now is extremely hungry. We want to dominate this space and we want to win. And so we are pushing as hard as we possibly can. I'm constantly pushing on our product and development team because I see stuff like Shining come out. And as someone who's been in this digital space, it's exciting for me. And I'm like, wow, that's a great innovation. And then it's also frustrating because you're like, well, why are we behind the curve? Right. And why don't we have that? Right. And so you feel that. And I think a lot of, I think that release kind of shocked a lot of companies, actually. I don't think we were the only ones who realized, oh, that's something that's capable and possible with technology and with the accuracy of modern scanners.
And the other thing is it works. I mean, part of this contact measure machine thing I was doing, it wasn't just, I'm hopefully going to get a few publications. I hope for next year it's a pain writing papers. But anyway, one of my other things I looked at was photogrammetry systems versus Elite, versus True Abutment, versus PIC, versus ICAM. And look, just too long didn't read sort of thing, TLDR, it works. It works. And and look, even the True Abutment thing works.
Yes.
And you are totally right. I mean, I was just excited because I'm just on the sidelines. I don't envy your guys' jobs. You guys have the hardest job in the world. Me as the end user, I just get to enjoy all this stuff and talk to all you guys and make all your friends and all these stuff. I think you're totally right, man. It was a release that definitely caught a lot of people off guard. And I'm sure many companies are going to start doing the same stuff.
I mean, you actually mentioned one of the kind of what I would say like open systems already, right? True Abutment has their IO Connect system. I mean, we have doctors using that with Medit scanners right now. So there are solutions for it. Granted, is it all in a seamless workflow right now? No, but I think that kind of stuff changes very quickly because we're just talking about software at that point. But those open systems are out there. There's a few others. There's one out of the UK. There's another one out of the EU that are already working in the same way as the True Abutment system. And, from what I've seen, the accuracy of those is comparable. So I think if I would, if I'm venturing, I'd say by end of next year, you're probably looking at every major scanner company having some sort of integrated solution. I can't imagine that's something that people will ignore. I know it's not something we're ignoring. We see it as a real need, but also we think that technology will just get easier and easier to use. I'm more worried about the people who maybe make photogrammetry machines, because I'm like, well, I'm not sure, the future there. But
sorry to interrupt you. I have to say,
no.
That Elite got released. I won't say which company because I'm not a prick, basically, but pretty much the next week, I got an email in my inbox, $10,000 off photogrammetry system.
Yeah. Look, I mean, hey, at least they recognized it. At least they're responding. That's all you can do. That's where we're at too. I mean, we're responding to the market where it's at. I mean, I think the Prime Scan 2 innovation was extremely interesting to us as well. That was another kind of technology that hopefully my CTO doesn't slap me on the wrist, but we've tested some internally, and it was one of those technologies where we're like, well, maybe this works in a couple markets, but not sure it's a global product.
I did talk with Interplay guys. I think they're ahead of their time with that one.
Yeah. It could be one of those where we look back and go, wow, that was definitely the future, because a lot of things are moving to cloud computing. I mean, some of the AI-based solutions that they're putting in the cloud now for digital design and stuff like that, they're incredible. And like, all you need is an internet connection. But yeah, I think if you look, some markets, it's a great solution. And I think in other markets where reliability of a connection is like less consistent, those markets, I'm like, well, it's still easier to just have a computer sitting on your desk right next to you.
And so I would say, if I put you on the spot, those were arguably the two big releases of the year, I would say. There was a few others like Itera Lumina and stuff, but I feel like those two captured most of the attention of the whole market. Yeah. So you'd say out of those two, Shining is probably your pick for the most exciting?
I mean, I think it was the solution that's doing something very different and actually moving, like, granted, I'm not a clinician, but only in talking to clinicians and listening to people like you, like, it actually transforms what you were doing previously into something that's just easier and a more streamlined workflow. And as long, to your point, if it works, that's like a true advancement, right? I mean, the Prime Scan system's interesting to me, but if you have a laptop sitting next to you versus cloud, the core of the scanning experience there doesn't change a ton, right? It changes where it has to process. But I mean, to me, that was, I think, the thing that definitely was the most exciting. And for them to put it in such a small product, I think was great. So our release this year and Shining's release, I think, also showed how small you can make a scanner nowadays and how lightweight. And that these really large, like half-pound scanners don't need to be the normal anymore. And, there's a couple companies that for a long time, that was kind of their hallmark, is like great technology, but really bulky, heavy scanners. And I think for some clinicians, that's fine. But for a lot of them, if they're going to use this frequently, I mean, I personally want to see that get more accessible for those people.
I totally agree, man. You make a number of great points. Yeah, the size thing was something else. I mean, it's funny with the Elite. If they just released the Elite, that would have been not like, oh, cool, a really tiny scanner, and they've done a huge upgrade over the ARL scan with a plug in the wall. But the photogrammetry was just like, what the heck? Where'd this come out from? What was really curious to me, like I look at Shining, and I just released the review of the Elite, if you're curious to read it.
I read it already.
I hope you're in mostly agreement. I mean, one thing I put in there, because me and you have both been watching the digital dentistry market for some time, either as consumers or you now on the inside. But what's really curious about Shining 3D to me is that they were nobodies. Like in 2019, when Medit was steamrolling, they were absolutely nobodies. And to me, they've kind of just taken almost like the homework of Medit and hashed it up. They've done a lot. They've almost followed what Medit has been doing. They also have a CAD software. They've done all the apps like Medit, and that's really been interesting to watch.
Yeah. I think you made the point correctly, which is like Medit did push the scanning kind of universe forward in one direction. And then if you're someone coming into that field, like, why wouldn't you copy that playbook? And I think we see that all over. I would say I've been, I think, most impressed by the fact that like they've continued to add stuff, because we've seen other scanners come on the market and they launch a product and it looks, I mean, I've had to laugh sometimes because the software between our software and theirs is like, you could tell somebody it looks like took a picture, and I won't call anyone out, but I'm
I
like,
think we all
you
know
know,
which one we're talking
yeah.
about.
So,
Yeah, a company that was acquired recently.
I don't know what you're talking about. But like, I mean, so in that case, like, where I think Shiny made a difference and why they've maybe, stuck around longer is they've continued to invest in ad. Whereas I think a lot of people launched a product, said, oh, we're going to undercut Medit and hope to just get a lot of sales based on that. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess the way we view it is, over the next 5 years or so, a lot of the price, compression, and there'll be consolidation. And you see some of these upstart companies kind of getting purchased, to your point earlier, is there's going to be a few legacy companies and then a few of the kind of more new scanning companies that have launched in the last 10 years that'll make it through those 5 to 10 year period. And yeah, I could see Shining being one of those. We know Medit will be, because of what we're investing in and how we're planning to continue to innovate. And then, I think it's just a matter of how do you build upon like our core brand philosophy and our fundamentals while still keeping pace with the innovation of other companies. So, from a technology standpoint, it's only going to get better for the clinician.
100%. Yeah. And it's already been really good. It's been a fun 5 years, and I can't wait for the next 5 years. Speaking of sales, and I hate to keep busting your balls on this, have they been pretty solid? Like, what, if you can give us, I mean, this is company secrets. I feel pretty telling you this on a podcast. Come on the podcast. We tell you
Right.
all your numbers. But like, it's been like decent. Is Medit like happy? Are they content? Has it been a good year, or what's the story?
Well, I would always say, as someone who's led sales teams in the past, it's never quite enough, right? It's never quite where it needs to be, because we always feel like we can do better. I will say though, like, granted, the global climate's a little different. The US and North America, we saw a really strong start to the year, and Medit saw a really strong start to the year, actually.
Nice.
We saw there was, I think, and it was an industry-wide, I think, slowdown, at least from the partners we've talked to through second and third quarter. But I will say, it overall for us, it's been an up year overall. And yeah, is it the explosion Medit was when it was, almost a startup to some degree? Well, no, we're a more mature company now, but we're still growing in, like, I can't give you the exact numbers, but definitely double digits every quarter.
I'm glad to hear that. Genuinely, I would hate to see the company have struggles, because again, I just have so much fond memories of the people there, the fond memories of what the company has done, and this kind of whole roller coaster that we all went through with Medit over the past 4 years.
Yeah. And I think it's something that, again, from outside looking in, I can see why that perception's there. We've spent a lot of time, though, this year, I think, investing in a team that will kind of bring Medit forward into the next 5-10 years of development. And I know, because I've seen our product schedule, like next year is going to be extremely busy. If you're worried about not hearing from Medit enough, that will definitely change next year.
I'm not going to ask you to tell us anything, because I've asked them enough, I feel. I assume we all just have to come to IDS. Is that correct? That's
well, you have to come to IDS, and then maybe we can drag you to the US or something, kind of in Q3 or something like that too. So yeah, we've got some exciting stuff at more than one point next year. But IDS is, I mean, we've got a few very exciting things lined up, and we'll have a big presence there. We'll have all of our team there too, and I think it's just going to be a showcase. I know there's a bunch of other companies bringing some very cool stuff too. And so it's a very exciting time for the industry. I think this is some of the height of the competition in this space is right now.
100%.
And so I'm sure there's stuff there that'll shock us, and we're hoping that we shock a few other people with what we brought.
I'm super excited, man. You're totally right. This IDS next year does seem to be like a big one. A lot of companies I've talked to are gearing up for a big one. So I'm excited. I will no doubt see you there. Speaking of the education piece, so let's stop talking about your numbers and sales, and your poor bloke, the man can
Yes,
finally breathe.
please stop. Yeah.
Exactly. He's like, who invited me to this damn thing? Education. What are you seeing on the ground, Matt? Let's just go from the start. Like, what
Sure.
proportion of clinics that have scanners? I know that's a real
Sure.
low ball question, but I'm curious because I hear different things. Are we in, at least in the States, in your region, which kind of is the leader of the world in terms of digital dentistry, are we seeing 60%? What are we at?
So we've done a good number of kind of surveys this year at a few different points to try to gauge. Then there's a small range, but I will say the general percentage that we've settled on is somewhere between 40 to 50%.
Wow.
As you move into specialties, though, the percentage gets a lot higher.
Interesting.
So orthodontists, prosthodontists, like we've seen some reports upwards of 70, sometimes almost 80% in those areas. And we have lab partners that we work very closely with who are at high 60s, 70% of their incoming work now is digital.
Interesting.
So we've I think based on our projections, we expect that in 2025, the majority of scanners being sold, at least in North America, will be sold to people who already own scanners, not to people entering digital for the first time.
That is super cool. That is very, very interesting, eh? What about the, so we're basically almost majority, if not already there.
Yeah.
And that's super exciting. You know, it only took, I would say, I mean, even though some scanners have been around for 2 decades, but let's say it took about 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is super exciting. I assume the growth is going to taper out a bit like any technological curve. What about the education side? What are you seeing on the ground from what you're seeing? Are doctors still, do they know how to use these things? Do they use, here's a better question. What's really big gaps that you see in education and that we really, people like me and other educators out there need to help clinicians cross that bridge?
Okay, so I guess the way I think about it is almost two completely separate audiences. So there's an entire subset of education that still exists and still valuable for the people who haven't gone digital.
Yeah.
Because now we're talking about the people who are truly recalcitrant. These are the guys who have pushed this off as far as they possibly can at this point, right? And their associates are into their practice and they're like, you still don't have a scanner? And like, you know, it's so like, you know, I used it all 4 years in dental school and I go into clinical practice and we're back to impressions and putty. And so I think that's a separate group of education for that, because they still need to be convinced that one, digital isn't scary. They can actually integrate it and their assistant isn't going to walk off the job the next day. And it's actually going to improve so many other things in their practice. So I think there's still a subset, and that's what I would call like classical scanning education. That's out there a lot. I think it's not as sexy, I think, as some of the other topics. So it doesn't get as much attention anymore. But there's still, even in the US where you say, hey, we're at the bleeding edge, we're still maybe at 50% total, right? So there's still a lot of dentists, you know, that'd be about 75,000 dentists in the US alone who still don't have a scanner. So,
and they've never probably used one. So you really need to start from the basics with them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. These are people who sometimes still have paper charts and stuff like that. And so like from that perspective, like you still have to say like, here are the real reasons it's going to help your practice. So that's one subset. What we're seeing on the kind of, I would say, more digitally advanced user side is really how to go from scan to integrating with all the other really exciting pieces of equipment in their office, and doing that in a way that is, one, achievable and like isn't going to completely blow up their workflow or screw up their scheduling. It's not going to interfere with hygiene or anything like that. How do I really truly start implementing that? And then some of it is just deciding on what systems are we going to use to accomplish that and how far do we want to go. So that's where I think where we've started to, as we look towards education next year and the things Medit is doing and that we're pushing for is, okay, how do we enable clinicians to go from scan to like print or mill in a really, really seamless way? And that's, I think, actually where the very like bleeding edge AI tech is really pushing the industry forward. And so as those AI assisted tools, as I always think of them, is it's, it's not AI designing, it's AI assisted. You're still in charge, you're still running it. But how about instead of having to learn a true CAD system, you can get 80, 90, 95% of the way there with some AI assisteds, make some small tweaks or have your assistant make some small tweaks to something, and then it can immediately go to print or immediately go to mill. And that's, I think, where we're making investments in our education and where we're trying to invest in our users and where our platform, we think, is evolving to. Labs will always be a big part of it, but it's just a matter of, well, there's some things that are better sent to the lab and there's some things that are easier to do in your clinic and help the patient out faster. And so that's, I think of it in those two silos.
I really love that because I totally agree. It's kind of like the pre-digital education, and then you digitize. Where do you want to do? Or where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
What is it that you want to move in-house in your practice? On that topic, what do you think is more, let's say, critical to focus on, in-house milling or in-house printing?
Oh, you're gonna get me in trouble with one group or another. I mean, I think to me right now, at least, it's almost a separate question. I would almost start with, what do you want to do in your practice first?
Cool.
Because, and like I have some, I have some really close relationships with people at Sprint Ray and some of the other manufacturers, and I know some clinicians who are using the ceramic filled resins on their permanent restorations. They're having great results. And so I don't think it's necessarily that you can't print everything. I just think it is right now for a lot of people, that's still a nascent technology. And the stuff to print that's tried and true, that's very well tested, is a different subset. If you want to do extremely high quality, very tested, like zirconia units and bridges and things like that, okay, then let's talk about a mill. And there's some amazing open solutions. I know you're a CEREC guy, so like you use that, so you know that workflow. There's also a lot of other systems on the market that are, compatible with every scanner. So
yeah, CEREC is one. I totally agree. Even though I'm a CEREC guy, there are good mills out there. A lot of Korean mills are quite good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and we're seeing those companies, I think, where some of the milling companies, I hope they'll forgive me for this, where they maybe didn't adapt as quickly as like the printer companies, because they started clinical.
Yeah.
All the printers started clinical. They built workflows for clinicians, and they integrated. They knew we have to be software led.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the mill companies, I think, are catching up to that because they started off with labs and they started off in that segment. And so they're adapting to something that wasn't maybe by nature their core business.
You put it perfectly, man. I totally agree. A lot of the chairside mills to this day just feel like a lab mill that's a bit smaller, but with the same, I wouldn't say cruddy software because that's a bit rough, but hard to use software. Like, to me, what brought to my mind is that when Medit released all their CAD apps, that a scanner company can pull it off and make it so simple, especially Model Builder. Everyone loves Model Builder. Yeah. It's like, what have the milling machine companies been doing for so long?
Yeah. Well, they relied on dental technicians who, as having worked in a dental lab, like those guys will learn anything and they do it quick and easy, and they fix
technical people. They can sort that out. But you give that to the average dentist, he has no idea.
Yeah. Well, he's better off spending his time doing something else anyway. That's the thing. So I think that's why, I mean, I don't know what it looked like globally, but in the US, I think CEREC adoption capped around like maybe 10%, right? And I think it's because a lot of clinicians made the choice of like, I can actually make more money sending to a lab because I have less time invested in designing or milling in my office. And so I think that's where I'm really excited, because I think we're very, very close, maybe a year or two away, to someone being able to scan and have it, come out of a printer or a mill almost with no one touching it in between. That's in their office. Like, then you start really talking about, okay, well, how can we better use our time in the clinic? Like, what else can we do? Can we see more patients? Can we do more comprehensive exams? Are there other things we could do? Maybe scan every patient at hygiene, do CBCT at hygiene, like add things to improve the quality of care overall.
I totally agree, man. And I also think, let's not forget, one of the main reasons is also cost, I believe.
Okay.
at 120K for a full system or whatever it is, 160K. In New Zealand, it's 230 New Zealand.
Jeez.
So yeah, I mean, like, that's probably why they kept off at the 10, 15, 20% mark, I think, is tops. At the same time, where printers are really jumping in is because they're cheap. They're just cheap and it's easy. It's way easier to fork out 20K than 100K.
Well, I mean, they're getting even lower than that now too. I think even the Midas I think is around 10.
Exactly.
And so like that's a very low barrier to entry if you say, hey, you could do this in your office, I think. So you're 100% right. I agree.
We spoke so much about scanners and your competitors, you poor bloke, like just constantly about them. What about the Midas? That was probably the biggest printer release of the year.
Yeah, it's one of the most exciting things I've seen hit the industry for sure. It's just, I think that kind of a solution has the potential to really drive adoption of either printed temporaries or, inlays or onlays or something like that. I work with some people who, as I said, are using it for permanent crowns, but I kind of hear a balanced opinion on that of terms of,
it's resin after all.
Yeah. So there's a balanced opinion there, but I mean, at least in the US, the reimbursement is the same, right? So for a lot of clinicians, it's an option. I think it's just a materials question at this point. To me, that's all it is. I think I trust enough in that team to the software will just get smoother and easier to use, and like they'll make going from a scan to print extremely fast. I think it's just, well, how much can you make the materials match what the clinician's looking for in that final product? And if you can do that, yeah, I mean, we could see a really big transformation, I think. To me, then I'm like, labs are still making a lot of night guards and stuff like that. And it's like that kind of stuff. I mean, you can hand that to a patient as they show up, right? And like, that was literally my entire lab career. I spent my time like working with doctors on night guards and sleep. But like, patient waits 2 weeks, right? The problem didn't stop for 2 weeks. Like you just delayed, actually giving them a therapeutic. So like that's the kind of stuff that just elevates the industry overall.
And I think Medit was a huge pushing force in this because like Medit splints, Medit this. Yeah. I mean, before Medit came along, that was unheard of to get these sort of things with a scanner. Didn't exist. What to pay. And that's why I still have really like warm feelings towards what Medit has done for the industry. And saying that, so speaking of all the innovations and everything, one really exciting thing about the printing was the whole the MIDAS and the Ivoclar collaboration, I think, was more exciting than the MIDAS itself. Just like what you said, and I totally agree, is it's all about materials. It's just going to be a materials game. And that's what I'm really excited about IDS in March to see what is going to be released. To wrap this up, because I am mindful of your time, Matt, you've been absolutely amazing. I have to say, you've probably been, out of the 20 episodes we have done, the most chill. You know that chill guy meme? That's you. Like the most like open-minded and just nice to talk to. I've had a lot of KG episodes where I try to push a little bit and just give me the sales pitch. But anyway, I really appreciate it. Let's just talk about the future and what you see, because I'm sure you're on the inside. You see some super exciting stuff, maybe what's happening with Medit, but also as an industry. What do you think, for people that are starting the year next year when this episode is released, what do you think are going to be some of the key things that clinicians should look out for? And what do you think are going to be the big movers for 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak a little selfishly here. I know based on where we're going, it's really about bringing more and more workflows to the Medit ecosystem. It will be adding some of the, the apps you've mentioned and things like that, of like Splints and ClinicCAD as a design suite. And like, but there's a lot of other products, maybe not at the volumes you do with those, but others that we're looking to bring into our ecosystem with the same kind of core philosophy of like accessible and AI assisted. And, these are products developed for a doctor and their assistant to use in their practice, right? And so we're looking to move in that direction and really kind of build out Medit's kind of software offering in a big way. So I think that's where I see a lot of it going. I think from a technology standpoint, especially on the hardware side, you mentioned like the differences in accuracy and things like that of scanners, and it even between the best scanner and the 5th or 10th best, like I'm sure it's, almost margins of error of accuracy at this point.
Right.
So what I think we'll start to see is people trying to improve the way and the interface between the clinician and the scanner, like making it way more just accessible, easy to use, I think is another thing. When we were talking a little bit about why haven't some people picked up scanning, it's like they may still remember when they did their first demo of a scanner 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And if you didn't follow the exact right scan path, it just, it was a total jarbled mess at the end. And like that part is just not only just, hey, the technology is going to get smaller, it's going to get lighter, it's going to be a bit easier to handle, but also just the idea of picking up and scanning from any place over any type of tissue, almost regardless of what the field looks like. Again, it's a camera, so that's somewhat on what you get, but it's just going to get a lot easier to scan. So the people who weren't able to just easily and quickly scan with older technology, I think across the board we're going to see that start to erode away. And yeah, I mean, I know what some of the other kind of are what we call like our adjacent kind of partner manufacturers are working on. And I think there's going to be some really exciting kind of unified workflows from our scanners, other scanner partners, and some of these chairside solutions where you'll look at it and go, wow, I could build an entire workflow out of this. And it feels, very seamless, something that's like, implementable and hopefully, to your point about education, something that we could teach in a day or two and not like over the course of 3 months.
Super exciting, man. I mean, you've fired me up. It's winter at the moment, but by the time this comes out, I'm already fired up for next year. It sounds like it's going to be an exciting year. You guys have heard it from Mr. Matt Mark, the Senior Director of Marketing and Education at Medit in the Americas. Matt, I do have to say thank you so much. Thanks for putting up with me. I get a little bit of crumpy at the end of the year. I put you on the spot a lot, but you took it like a champion. I think it's been an absolute great chat, my friend, and I totally agree with most of what you've said. And if anything, I'm excited. I'm excited for what Medit has to bring for next year, because maybe it was a bit of a lull period in this transition period, and it sounds like next year is going to be a really big year. So for any of those who are listening, please go check out Medit at IDS. That sounds like it's going to be a huge event for them. And you said something about Q3, Q4, so we'll just have to keep an eye out.
Definitely. All right. Thanks for the chance to talk to you. We appreciate it.
No worries at all. Thank you for your time. And for all of you who are listening, thank you for your attention. I hope you got something out of this podcast. This concludes season 2 of the Digital Dentistry Decoded podcast here at IDD. I'm your host, Ahmad Al-Hassiny, and to support us, like, comment, share it with your friends, your colleagues, and we will see you next year for the next season, which is season 3, where we hope to talk to more industry leaders and more just amazing people like Matt. So once again, thanks a lot, Matt, and I'll see you at IDS.
See you there. Thanks.